Lagos was alive, noisy, vibrant, and always moving. The streets were a labyrinth of people, cars, and countless stories. But for Adeola, a restless university student, the city felt like a constant storm she was trying to weather. Her family had settled here from the rural outskirts, and though she had lived in Lagos for years, it still held secrets she couldn't quite grasp. Late one evening, as the sky painted itself with hues of orange and purple, Adeola walked home through the quiet streets of Ikoyi. The streets were still, save for the hum of a distant generator and the occasional bark of a street dog. She had been tutoring young kids at a nearby school and was tired, but something kept her feet moving forward. As she turned down a narrow alleyway near her apartment, she felt a chill crawl up her spine. The narrow path was flanked by tall buildings with fading paint and locked gates. A single flickering streetlight offered little comfort, casting elongated shadows against the cracked pavement. Suddenly, she heard footsteps, deliberate, steady. Her heart thudded loudly against her chest, the sound echoing in the stillness. She stopped and turned, but the street was empty. The silence was deafening, almost mocking her. Just when she thought she was imagining things, a figure emerged from the shadows at the end of the alley, a tall, slender man with a hood pulled low over his face. Adeola froze. Her breath hitched as her instincts screamed at her to run, but the fear held her rooted in place. "Are you lost?" The voice was smooth, calm, almost gentle. Yet the chill it sent through her body was anything but reassuring. "No," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just trying to get home." The man stepped closer, the dim light catching glimpses of his piercing eyes. "Home," he repeated, his voice carrying a strange weight. "Home is where the secrets lie, isn't it?" Adeola's mind raced. She had never seen this man before, and there was something disturbingly familiar about his presence, something ancient, almost mythical. She tried to move past him, but his gaze followed her every step, pinning her in place. "I've been watching you, Adeola," he said softly. "Your family has ties to Lagos that stretch far deeper than you know, and the past, it has a way of catching up." Her pulse quickened, every word like a dagger. Who are you?" she whispered. The man smiled faintly. "A friend," he said, "and perhaps more." Before she could react, a distant car horn blared. Adeola seized the moment and bolted, the sound of her own footsteps a chorus in the oppressive quiet. The man's shadowy form blurred in the darkness behind her, but he didn't chase. He simply watched as she disappeared into the streets of Lagos once more. Breathless and trembling, Adeola finally reached her apartment. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, the weight of the night pressing down on her. She thought she had escaped whatever danger lurked in the shadows, but deep down she knew it was far from over. Who was that man? And why did his words haunt her like the ghost of a long-forgotten memory? Lagos held secrets, and tonight a new one had just been unearthed. The next few days were uneasy for Adeola. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every corner she turned, every shadow that flickered in her peripheral vision, made her nerves fray. She tried to focus on her studies, but the haunting memory of the mysterious man lingered, like a dark cloud hovering over her thoughts. Her family noticed her distant demeanor, but offered no explanations. Her younger brother Tolu joked about how serious she looked, though he had no idea of the turmoil she was going through. Her parents, busy with work and community affairs, couldn't sense the strange tension that filled the air whenever Adeola was around. One evening, after a long day at the library, Adeola took a detour through Tafawa Balewa Square on her way home. She needed to clear her head. The square was bustling with street vendors and locals, their voices blending into a lively symphony of commerce and conversation. Yet, amidst the crowd, a familiar figure caught her attention. It was him, the man from the alley. This time, he stood across the square, leaning casually against a stone pillar, his eyes fixed on her. Their gazes locked from a distance, the crowd becoming an irrelevant blur as his presence consumed her vision. She quickened her pace, heart racing, but his steady gaze followed her every step. "Why do you run?" His voice echoed in her mind, soft but unmistakably there. "You can't escape the past, Adeola." She pushed through the crowd, desperate to get away, but the man was never too far behind. Eventually she found herself near the edge of the square, the noise of the city fading into the distance. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling with both fear and anger. "What do you want from me?" The man stepped closer, his presence commanding yet mysterious. "You don't remember, do you?" he said, his voice like a puzzle. "Your family's history is deeply intertwined with the roots of Lagos. There are secrets, dark secrets." Adeola's breath caught. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You will," he whispered, "sooner than you think." Before she could respond, the crowd shifted, and he vanished into the sea of people. Once again, Adeola was left standing alone, a whirlwind of questions swirling in her mind. That night, she couldn't sleep. The man's words echoed in her thoughts, louder and more persistent than ever. She knew something was unfolding, a story her family had kept hidden for far too long. Determined to uncover the truth, Adeola turned to the only person who might have answers, her grandmother, Mama Efe. The elderly woman had always been a source of wisdom and comfort, often telling her stories of their ancestors and the ancient history of Lagos. Perhaps she held the key to unraveling the enigma. The next day she visited Mama Efe's small home in Isolo. The old woman sat on the porch, surrounded by pots of herbs and photographs of ancestors past. When Adeola mentioned the mysterious man, Mama Efe's eyes darkened. "You've seen him," Mama Efe said, her voice calm but weighty. "I feared this day would come." "Who is he?" Adeola asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mama Efe took a deep breath. "He's a guardian, a figure from the past. He watches over our family, guarding the truth, but not all truths are meant to be known." Adeola's heart sank. "But why now? What does he want?" "The past is restless," Mama Efe replied. "Your family holds the key to secrets long buried, secrets that those in power would rather remain hidden." The weight of her grandmother's words pressed down on Adeola. She had always known Lagos was more than just a bustling city. Its history was ancient, its undercurrents far darker than anyone dared to believe. And now the shadows were rising again, pulling her into a story she wasn't sure she could control. As night fell, Adeola sat alone in her room, the city outside her window still alive with movement. She gazed out into the darkness, a knot of uncertainty tightening in her chest. The truth was closing in. There was no turning back now. Days turned into nights, and Adeola found herself consumed by the mysteries that swirled around her. The city of Lagos, once familiar, felt like a maze with hidden corridors she couldn't navigate alone. Every glance over her shoulder revealed nothing, yet the weight of the unknown pressed heavily on her. With each encounter, the mysterious man became more than just a shadow in her memories. His presence loomed larger, weaving itself into her thoughts and dreams. She became restless, her once carefree days at university replaced by sleepless nights spent piecing together the fragments of her family's past. Mama Efe's warnings echoed in her mind. "The truth will come at a cost," her grandmother had said, and Adeola wasn't sure if she was ready to pay that price. One evening, after hours of researching old family records in the library, Adeola returned home, her mind spinning with more questions than answers. She stumbled into her apartment, exhaustion washing over her like a tide. But just as she was about to shut the door, a voice called out from the hallway. "Adeola." Her breath hitched. Slowly she turned to face him. The man stood just a few feet away, his shadow stretching along the dim corridor. "You've been digging deep," he said, his voice calm but laced with something more unsettling. "I need answers," Adeola said firmly. "I don't understand what's happening, why you're here." He stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "You've uncovered pieces of the past that were meant to stay hidden. The truth, when revealed, can tear lives apart." "I don't care," she said defiantly. "I need to know. My family deserves to know." He sighed, the sound almost haunting in its depth. "Very well, but know this. Not everyone seeks the truth for noble reasons. Some are drawn to power, others to control. I'm not like them," she said quietly. "I just want to understand." The man's expression softened, though the weight of his words lingered. "Then let's start with what you already know. Your ancestors were more than mere inhabitants of Lagos. They were rulers of an ancient lineage, guardians of a power buried deep beneath the city's surface." "Power?" Adeola's voice faltered. "The kind that has the ability to change lives and destroy them," he said. "Your family once held the secrets of a forgotten society, one intertwined with the very foundations of Lagos. But it came at a cost, one that has been buried for generations." What kind of society? Adiola pressed, her voice rising with urgency. A society that sought to preserve the balance of power between light and shadow, he explained. But when the city grew too large, too chaotic, those secrets became dangerous. They were hidden away, forgotten by most, until now. Adiola felt her breath catch in her throat. So you're saying my family holds a key to something dangerous? Yes, the man replied simply. The balance has been disturbed, and now the shadows seek to reclaim what was lost. You are a part of this legacy, whether you like it or not. You keep talking about shadows and power, Adiola said, but what does that mean for me, for my family? It means, he said, his voice growing darker, that the path you're on will lead you into a war between past and present, and not everyone will survive. Her heart raced, but she stood firm. I'm not afraid. Good, he said, a hint of a smile creeping onto his lips. But know that fear is not the only weapon in this fight. The hallway fell into a heavy silence. Adiola's breath slowed, her mind reeling from everything she had just learned. The weight of his words pressed down on her, truths that were once myths, now etched in reality. Before she could say another word, he turned and disappeared into the shadows once more, leaving Adiola alone in the dim corridor. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, the quiet of the room providing little comfort. The city continued its nightly hum, but inside Adiola was trapped in a web of ancient secrets, the truth finally unravelling before her. The following days felt like a blur. Adiola couldn't shake the weight of the revelations she had uncovered. Her dreams were filled with cryptic symbols, whispers of forgotten names, and haunting images of a city long lost in the shadows. The man's warning echoed in her mind like a haunting melody. The balance has been disturbed. Her search led her deeper into the depths of Lagos's history. Libraries, old photographs, and dusty archives became her sanctuary. But no matter how much she uncovered, the truth only seemed to unravel more questions than answers. One evening, after spending hours poring over ancient texts, Adiola found herself sitting on the rooftop of her apartment building, overlooking the city. The skyline of Lagos stretched endlessly, the lights blinking in a chaotic dance. She felt small against the vastness of the city, yet strangely connected to its soul. A shadow fell beside her. It was him again, silent, steady, and always watching. "What do you want from me?" Adiola asked, her voice firm despite the tremor beneath it. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he sat down beside her, his presence consuming the space around them. "Your destiny," he said softly, almost like a prayer. "It is tied to the very essence of Lagos." "Destiny," Adiola echoed, shaking her head. "That's what they always say when they want to control people." "This is different," he said. "The truth you seek will set you free, or it will destroy everything you hold dear." A chill ran down her spine. "Why me?" "Because you carry the bloodline," he replied, "and it has awakened after centuries of slumber." "You speak in riddles," she said, her frustration spilling over. "I'm tired of not knowing what's real and what's not." The man's gaze softened. "Sometimes the truth isn't easy, but it's the only thing that will guide you now." Adiola took a deep breath, the weight of his words settling heavily upon her. "So what now?" "Now," he said, his voice low, "you must decide. Do you embrace the power that lies dormant within you, or do you resist it and let the city fall into chaos?" "I don't want power," she said, shaking her head. "I just want to live my life." "You think you can choose to walk away?" he asked. "This isn't about choice anymore, it's about survival." She was silent for a long moment, the city below continuing its relentless hum. The thought of embracing something so ancient and dangerous terrified her. But so did the idea of ignoring it. Her family had survived generations of turmoil. What made her believe she could escape it? "We'll see," she finally said, her voice low and steady, "but I won't do it alone." He smiled faintly. "Good, because the shadows won't wait." The next day, Adiola took her search to a deeper level. She reached out to a historian named Dr. Ayinde, whose expertise on Lagos's forgotten history was renowned. Dr. Ayinde welcomed her into his study, filled with ancient manuscripts and relics from Lagos's past. "I've heard whispers of a lineage," Dr. Ayinde began as they sat in his dimly lit library, "but not many know the full extent of their influence. There's a reason they kept themselves hidden. Power like theirs doesn't come without consequences." "What kind of power are we talking about?" Adiola asked, her voice tense. Dr. Ayinde leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing in thought. A power that connects the living to the dead, the seen to the unseen. A power that governs the balance between life and death, light and dark. Adeola shuddered. And what happens if that balance is disrupted? The city falls into chaos, Dr. Ayinde said gravely. Lagos thrives on its equilibrium. Remove that balance, and it collapses upon itself. She grasped at her notebook, trying to take in everything he was telling her. Every revelation painted a picture more complex than she had imagined. A city not just of commerce and culture, but of magic and ancient forces. The door to the library creaked open, and the mysterious man stepped in once more. His presence was like a shadow that refused to leave her side. You see, Dr. Ayinde said, motioning to him, he's the one who's been guiding you. Whether you accept it or not, you're already on this path. Adeola looked between them, her heart pounding. The weight of the truth was unbearable, yet she couldn't deny its reality. We're running out of time, the man said quietly. The city is shifting. The shadows are growing stronger. Dr. Ayinde glanced at him, then back at Adeola. The path you've started is dangerous, but it's necessary. The question is, how far are you willing to go? Adeola stared at her notebook, the scribbled pages filled with questions and fragments of a story she was only beginning to understand. Her fingers tightened around the pen, and in that moment she knew she couldn't turn back now. The balance must be restored, she said firmly, her voice resolute, whatever the cost. The days that followed were a whirlwind of investigation and sleepless nights for Adeola. The deeper she delved into Lagos's forgotten history, the more connected she felt to the mysteries that bound her family to the city's darkest secrets. With Dr. Ayinde's guidance and the constant presence of the mysterious man, she uncovered layers as upon layers of a past that had long been buried beneath the surface of modern Lagos. As she pieced together fragmented stories from ancient texts and oral traditions, the truth began to emerge, a truth that wasn't just historical but deeply personal. Her ancestors weren't just leaders of a forgotten society, they were protectors of an ancient force, one that controlled the city's very essence. But with power came a price. One evening, Adeola returned home, her mind heavy with the weight of what she had learned. She sat in her small apartment, the city's distant hum providing little comfort. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound magnified. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, something that wasn't quite human. The knock at the door was soft, deliberate, yet it startled her all the same. When she opened it, the man stood there once again, his eyes dark and unreadable. "You've come far," he said, "but it's not enough. What more do you want?" she asked, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "Your trust," he replied, "and your belief." Adeola frowned. "In what?" "In yourself," he said simply, "in the power that lies dormant within you. You've seen what's at stake, but you hesitate because the cost is too high." "I don't know how to control this," she admitted quietly. "I don't want to hurt anyone." "You won't," he reassured her. "Not if you embrace it fully, but first you need to understand what it truly means." "The balance?" she asked, a question that had haunted her dreams for nights. "The balance between life and death, light and shadow," he said softly. "It's fragile, like a thin veil that can be torn by the slightest disruption. That's what you must protect, not just for yourself, but for the city." Adeola closed her eyes, the weight of his words pressing down on her. Lagos had always been a bustling metropolis, but the idea that it held such ancient forces beneath its surface unsettled her more than anything else. "Can you help me?" she asked after a pause, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll guide you," he said, "but the journey is yours alone." The next morning, Adeola sat with Dr. Ayinde once again. The historian's library was a sanctuary from the chaos of the city, filled with artifacts and ancient manuscripts that spoke of a time before Lagos was modernized. "What do you know about the balance?" Adeola asked, her voice steady but filled with urgency. Dr. Ayinde paused, tapping his fingers thoughtfully on the desk. "It's not something easily understood. The balance is more than a concept. It's a force, an energy that governs the harmony between the world of the living and the unseen realms. When disrupted, the city suffers." "But how do I protect it?" she pressed, feeling the weight of responsibility crash down on her shoulders. "It's not something you control alone," Dr. Ayinde said. The balance is a collective force. Your ancestors once held the reins, but they had allies, people who understood the ancient magic, who believed in the harmony it maintained. Adeola's thoughts drifted to the mysterious man who had been her guide. Who are they? The allies? Dr. Allende hesitated. Those who walk in the shadows often work in secrecy. They're hidden figures, those who understand the price of power and the cost of meddling with forces beyond comprehension. They're dangerous? Adeola asked, feeling a growing sense of unease. They protect the balance, he said slowly. But not everyone does it for the right reasons. Some seek to manipulate, to control it for their own gain. Those are the ones you must be wary of. As the conversation deepened, Adeola realized the complexity of her position. It wasn't just about understanding history. It was about navigating a web of alliances, betrayals, and ancient forces that spanned generations. She couldn't trust anyone fully, not even the man who had been her guide. That night she sat by her window, gazing out over Lagos once more. The city was alive, yet in her heart there was a growing fear. The balance was fragile, and every decision she made would ripple through time, altering the fate of the city she loved. "Please," she whispered into the night, "guide me, show me the way." The city of Lagos continued to pulse beneath Adeola's feet, alive with its cacophony of life, yet the weight of ancient forces pressed down on her. Each day brought more questions and fewer answers. The more she delved into the mysteries of her family's past, the deeper she became entangled in a web of shadows that seemed to stretch far beyond her understanding. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in a fiery blend of reds and oranges, Adeola stood on her rooftop, the breeze tousling her hair. The city spread out before her, endless and unpredictable, but tonight it felt different, like something had shifted, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. The man appeared again. "You're restless," he said, his voice smooth yet commanding. His eyes traced her form, lingering on her features as though he were memorizing them. "I'm tired," Adeola admitted softly, tired of not knowing what's real and what's not. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet comforting in its intensity. "Soon you'll know, all of it, every truth." "But at what cost?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You've been guiding me through this, but what happens when I reach the end?" His gaze was steady, unwavering. "You've already reached the end, haven't you?" "I don't feel like I've begun," she confessed. "This isn't the end. It's a new beginning." The city below was a sea of light and motion, but for a moment, time seemed to freeze. Adeola's breath hitched as the distance between them grew thinner, his presence enveloping her like a cloak of mystery. She could feel the electric hum of his energy, the pull of something deeper, a connection neither of them fully understood. "I've been watching you," he said, his voice low, nearly a whisper, "long before tonight." "Why?" she asked, searching his eyes for answers. "Because you're special," he said softly. "Because you're meant to be part of something greater than either of us." "And what happens when I can't handle it?" she questioned, her voice cracking under the weight of her uncertainty. "You'll handle it," he said firmly, "because you're strong, and because we're stronger together." In the stillness of the rooftop, the air between them seemed to thrum with unspoken promises. Adeola's breath caught as her heart raced, a wave of emotions crashing over her. The city around them blurred into the background as their eyes locked, an unspoken connection pulling them closer. "I can't do this alone," she said quietly. "You don't have to," he replied, his voice a breath against her skin. "I'm here." For a moment, everything felt suspended. The city remained alive, but the world between them felt private, intimate, like no one else existed. And then, without warning, he leaned in. Their first kiss was a clash of worlds, a union of light and shadow, reality and dream. It was electric, a spark that ignited the air around them. In that moment, all the secrets, the danger, and the weight of their burdens melted away. It was just them, lost in the endless cityscape, connected by something deeper than history or magic, a raw, undeniable bond. When they parted, Adeola's breath was ragged. She gazed up at him, her heart pounding in her chest, unsure of what came next, but knowing they were destined to face it together. The man smiled softly, a flicker of something tender in his eyes. "Lagos isn't done with us yet," he said, "but we'll walk its paths together." And with that, he stepped back into the shadows, disappearing into the night. Adiola stood there, the weight of the night pressing down on her, but this time there was a quiet comfort in knowing she wasn't alone. The city continued to hum around her, but in that moment she knew that no matter how perilous the journey, she would face it, because some bonds couldn't be broken, not even by the darkness. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our amazing stories.